Alright, I've got a question for you. Do you remember a time when a friend of yours who likes games but maybe doesn't play them as much as you asked about what you've been playing recently? Maybe it was a parent or someone who was trying to take an interest in your hobbies, or maybe it was just someone trying to find a new game to play. I feel like we must have all been in this conversation where we go, oh yeah, I've been playing this game called Zombie Titan Warriors 4, it's a lot of fun. And they're like, oh yeah, well that's great, what do you do in it? Oh, well, you see, it's this amazing roguelike take on the zombie first-person co-op adventure genre where you basically have survival mechanics and realistic elements to deal with in the world, while also trying to evade a time limit that sends you back to the beginning. It's so much better than Zombie Titan Warriors 1 and 2 because they didn't have the same kind of graphical fidelity.
Boring explanations.
Like, okay, is it just me, or is describing video games getting harder and harder these days? I mean, look at literally any description for any game in the last couple of years in a digital store, and you'll be greeted with this utter nonsense.
A ground-based RTS prequel to the classic Homeworld game. Super Animal Royale is a 64-player frenetic top-down 2D battle royale. Is a deck-building roguelite where you negotiate, fight, steal, or otherwise persuade others to get your way. The long-awaited, free-to-play, online RPG Phantasy Star Online 2 has arrived. It features revolutionary gameplay features such as endless adventures, hybrid custom action, and unprecedented
Total bullshit.
What are these? And why are there so many genres in one game? And why? Why do so many games now require you to spend hundreds of hours playing them in order for you to even make a dent? Open worlds just continue to get bigger, and some massive AAA games are shipping without basic save features because they demand that you beat massive sections of them in one sitting. Honestly, I was kinda relieved when I plugged in my PS5 back in November, and my first next-gen experience was a chilled-out game that only demanded about 8 hours from me and allowed me to do the unthinkable: relax in my free time. Back in 2016, a studio called Giant Squid made Abzu, an underwater adventure all about life in the ocean and how humanity is slowly destroying it while fishing for oil. The game was considered by many to be the spiritual successor to that game company's 2012 title, Journey, which if you've watched pretty much any of my content, you'll know is a very important game to me. The team at Giant Squid even featured some of the developers that made Journey, and Austin Wintory's mesmerizing score put players right back into that experience. To Giant Squid's detriment, however, times were a-changin' in 2016. The walking simulator genre was getting hammered from pillar to post by critics and Reddit users who wanted more to do in them. Unfortunately, this bled into Abzu's reception, and what's more, people weren't too happy that Abzu was copying so much from Journey. To them, it felt like a walking simulator because there was, quote, nothing to do. Cries of, we already have a Journey, and yeah, but what is the game? Were heard from every direction. So on the whole, Abzu became this enchanting sleeper hit that you could tell was a real labour of love for the studio. Fast forward to 2020, and Giant Squid were gearing up to release their next game, the Pathless, a third-person adventure game where you play as an archer who uses their pet eagle to traverse the world and conquer its darkness. Also, your eagle is obsessed with sitting on dead bodies' heads for some reason?
Raindrops are falling on my head, and just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed, nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head, they keep falling.
The Pathless is a stunning little game. Releasing at the same time as the PlayStation 5, it was one of the only new IPs gamers could get their hands on at launch. Uniquely, it made use of the next-gen hardware while not mixing in over-complicated video game concepts. For me, playing this game at the start of a new console generation was exactly what I needed, because there's been so much talk in recent years of games becoming this massive, technologically out-of-this-world medium that almost forgets why some of its best titles have also been the most basic. More than anything, the Pathless showed me that sometimes you really can't beat simplicity. Simplicity is baked into every asset of the Pathless, and I think it can show us why we don't always need hundreds of different combat systems, complicated open worlds, and scientifically detailed character progression. Sometimes, the best games are the ones that scale all of those things back. In the Pathless, you have one goal: return the light to the world by defeating corrupted gods and solving cursed puzzles. The gameplay loop you experience is nice and straightforward. You'll traverse this game's beautiful open levels by shooting small targets as you pass them by. While avoiding a storm that's continually sneaking up behind you, you'll collect what we'll call puzzle tokens in order to cleanse some towers. You'll then fight an area's boss and move on to the next level. The fantastic thing about this game is that it carried on the same feeling of peacefulness and exploration that people knew from Abzu and Journey, but it added some basic gameplay elements and movement mechanics for critics who wanted to have more agency. Giant Squid struck a very fine middle ground with this game, where, for players who wanted a deeper experience with a higher skill ceiling, there are mechanics to master and perfect. For those who are just along for the journey, the game is extremely easy to just pick up and play. When it comes to the all-important aspect of progression, the Pathless goes in a very interesting direction. Often what we see are games that get dramatically harder and require the player to get better in order to progress. In the Pathless, on the other hand, the difficulty level stays mostly the same and provides a healthy experimental environment in which the player can progress as much or as little as they'd like. This progression system is also based on powering up the player as opposed to making bosses and puzzles more stressful. For example, you'll receive more eagle flaps, a larger endurance meter, and varying targets to shoot that will grant you additional movement capabilities. No doubt, the bosses towards the end of this game take longer to deal with, but the game doesn't continue to introduce new mechanics that the player hasn't already seen before. Moreover, the Pathless's world and level design is also nice and simplistic. These explorative environments never really change throughout the game, which provides a nice level of familiarity without losing that joy of exploration. On a mechanical level, the game doesn't really ask too much of the player. I know you can play this game on PC, so forgive me if that's your platform, but on PlayStation, movement is a real joy to take part in. You'll use the analog sticks to move around and control the camera, the X button to take to the air, the left trigger to move quickly, and your right trigger to aim, hold, and fire arrows.
Never hold.
But I have to aim.
Never aim.
Never aim.
Thankfully, there's also an auto-aim system to enhance your archery at high speeds, so you don't have to worry about being too precise on the move. This entire experience makes for a gameplay system that's really relaxing to pick up and play around with, but definitely one you can get better at as you learn the game's world and how to move your character through it more efficiently. When it came to the thought-provoking parts of this game, like the story and the puzzles, Giant Squid really refused to overcomplicate things. They started by adding a more in-depth story to the Pathless than they did in Abzu, and again, their MO was providing a little bit to get hooked on, with plenty of optional chunks that you can dive into if you want to learn more. This was a perfect progression from Abzu because it held the same open-for-interpretation approach, but dispelled the extreme ambiguity that meant people didn't really understand what the game was trying to say. You know, I actually tried making a video essay a few years ago about why Abzu's story was sinfully misread. Because when you look online for story explanations and stuff like that, people thought that it was about some alien underwater civilization that had nothing to do with our world, which was kind of dumb, right? Because like the game is all about you learning about ocean life from our planet. Like it gives you all the Latin names and stuff, but people couldn't make the link and be like, oh, hey, maybe this game is about us and how we're destroying our ocean's wildlife, and maybe I shouldn't use so many single-use plastic. The point is, the Pathless didn't overstate the importance of its story. It introduced the main plot points by putting plenty of readables next to the early game objectives, but after that, these text collectibles are all scattered to the wind for you to find on your own. The point of including these text bites and cutscenes, though, was most likely to allow players to dive deeper into the game's story if they wanted to do so. A big part of the Pathless is puzzle solving, which usually for me means a big thumbs down. But Giant Squid were very kind in this game, and the puzzles never really require too much heavy thinking. The puzzles in this game usually consist of using one of the few central mechanics. You'll either have to use your eagle to explore deeper into an area, or you'll have to shoot an arrow through some specific targets, often by finding the right position to shoot from. These are all environmental puzzles then, and they never really take too much time to work out or get infuriating when you're suddenly interrupted by each boss's travelling storm. Again, this refusal to overcomplicate makes the Pathless stand out from other games of this era. It doesn't ask too much of you, but its design still allows you to feel like you've accomplished things when you solve a puzzle or find out more about its story. Those critics who think that Abzu, Journey, and other walking simulators are too easy and don't provide enough player agency should really pick up the Pathless. For me, this is the best example of a walking simulator that provides enough traditional gameplay elements to not be counted as one. Furthermore, mastering this game's mechanics to the point that boss fights become easy does take a real degree of practice and skill. These boss fights aren't a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination, but they'll never frustrate you enough to make you remember them as an unfair challenge either. Using your small arsenal of mechanics to obliterate a boss without taking damage is blissfully satisfying, and this game's simplistic approach to boss design really helps that. The same goes for Traversal. When you loose an arrow at a target, you really feel this burst of dopamine. On the other hand, when you take too long to aim or you hit a tree that's now blocking your view, the sudden gap in momentum really makes you want to get better. For sure, auto-aim helps you to get around without too much bother, but you soon realize there are real tricks to successfully moving from one puzzle to the next without any downtime in speed. All in all, the Pathless shows us why simplicity in game design can be a fantastic thing in the modern era. It does a stellar job of delivering that much sought-after gameplay that's easy to pick up but challenging to master. What's more, it does it without combining 8 genres into one or demanding you beat the entire game in one sitting. Don't get me wrong, I am so excited for the beefed up next-gen games that are coming out soon. Hell, while you're watching this, I'm probably enjoying all of the technically astounding bits of ray tracing in Ratchet & Clank. But my point is, as games continue to evolve and get more and more complicated, I hope Giant Squid's refreshing, scaled-back approach to the Pathless is looked up to more. As games continue to get bigger, more detailed, and as realistic as technology will allow, I hope the industry remembers the simplicity of Pong and the successes of Snake. The Pathless is the latest in a long line of games that remind us that no amount of SSDs, ray tracing, or 3D audio alone can make a game fun. Thank you so much for watching this video. Yes, I know it has been ages since I made one of these, so hopefully you've enjoyed it and I haven't lost my mojo. Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon, because while I'm job hunting in the next few months, I'm gonna try to make as many of these videos as I can, because I've really missed it. Also, yes, I'm job hunting. Please hire me, someone. Please hire me. In the meantime though, be sure to comment down below and tell me what your favorite simplistic game is. If you want to keep up with the biggest video game news each month, be sure to check out our podcast PodCoping. We put each episode out on YouTube. The most recent one is actually there right now with some gameplay of Ratchet & Clank, so check that out if you want to see more. But it is also available on whatever podcast provider you prefer to listen to in audio form. If you want to follow us on social media, all the links are below. But for now, I'll say remember to keep it simple and tune in next time.